Have you ever felt that persistent low-grade unease? That feeling of being on edge even when, well, everything around you seems pretty much okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what we're diving into today.
Exactly. And we've been looking at some really fascinating ideas around how we relate to ourselves internally and how that really impacts our nervous system.
Okay.
And the core insight, I think, is this. Our inner attitude, how we treat ourselves in our own heads, it has this profound effect on our sense of inner safety.
Right. So in this deep dive, what we want to do is give you a shortcut, maybe, to understanding just how much your own self-acceptance or, the lack of it can really influence your body's stress response.
Mm-hmm.
It's a connection that feels, well, pretty key to feeling more at ease in the world. Okay, so let's unpack this a bit.
Yeah, let's do it.
Think of your nervous system as like a silent guardian, maybe,
Yeah.
constantly scanning for danger, both out there, externally, and also within your own thoughts and feelings.
That's a great way to put it. This system, the autonomic nervous system, the ANS, it's like this inner bodyguard, always on the lookout, mostly operating behind the scenes.
Right? Unconsciously.
Exactly. And what's really fascinating and kind of central here is that this bodyguard, it isn't judgmental. It doesn't think, oh, that's a silly worry. It simply reacts to what it perceives as a threat.
Okay.
So when it senses something amiss, could be a real external danger, like a car swerving or something happening inside us, it triggers that well-known fight, flight, or freeze response.
Right. Those really primal survival instincts. We all kind of know that feeling, that surge of adrenaline. But this is where it gets, I think, really interesting based on what we looked at.
Mm-hmm.
The material we've explored really emphasizes that this threat detection isn't just about, like, lions and tigers or, scary external stuff.
No, not at all.
It includes the way we talk to ourselves, those judgments we make about who we are.
That's such a crucial point. The autonomic nervous system, it doesn't really distinguish between, let's say, a sudden loud noise outside your window and an internal thought like, I'm just not good enough, or I shouldn't be feeling this angry, or even replaying something like, why did I say that? That was so stupid.
Wow. So hang on. That inner critic, that voice that so many of us have chattering away,
Yeah.
is actually setting off the same biological alarm bells in our body as if we were facing a real, tangible, physical danger.
Essentially, yes. When those self-critical thoughts pop up, the body reacts as if it's under attack. It activates the sympathetic nervous system, that's the accelerator leading to those really familiar physical sensations. Your heart might start racing, your breathing gets shallow, your muscles tense up. It's like, when you replay an embarrassing moment in your head, maybe from years ago.
Oh, yeah. Cringe.
Right, and you actually feel your stomach clench, you blush all over again. That's it happening. Your body is reacting now to the thought.
Okay, wow. And what happens if this isn't just an occasional thought? What if this is like a constant soundtrack running in our minds, if we're habitually, putting ourselves down?
Well, if this self-rejection becomes a really deeply ingrained pattern, like a continuous internal denial or criticism of our thoughts, our feelings, our desires, it can lead to a state of chronic stress.
Right.
Your fight or flight system essentially stays switched on, or at least on high alert, even when there's no obvious external danger anywhere in sight.
The perspectives we looked at, they highlighted some really common ways this self-rejection plays out, didn't they? Things like feeling deeply ashamed of certain emotions.
Like anger or sadness.
Yeah, or carrying guilt about past actions, maybe things you can't change, or just that relentless self-criticism that never seems to let up. It's like we end up constantly sort of at war with ourselves inside.
Precisely. And another really common one is that conditional self-worth, that underlying belief, often unconscious, that says, I am only valuable or acceptable if.
If I achieve this or look like that.
Exactly. If I get the promotion, if I lose the weight, if I'm always helpful, if I never make mistakes, it creates this really damaging internal loop. The more we reject parts of ourselves, the more our nervous system senses danger.
And the less inner peace we experience. It keeps us keyed up.
Totally. So it's not always about the external pressures, although those are real too, of course. But it's so much about this internal atmosphere we create, which is constantly signaling threat, threat, threat to our own system.
And that manifests how?
Well, this persistent state of perceived threat can show up as chronic alertness, maybe hypervigilance, always scanning the horizon, and that nagging background feeling of anxiety.
Okay.
And physically, as the research points out, a body that's constantly tense, holding itself braced, well, that can even contribute to chronic pain over time. The tension becomes physically embedded.
Okay, so we're seeing pretty clearly how self-rejection, that inner critic, puts our nervous system on high alert.
Yeah.
So what's the antidote here? How do we signal safety to that inner bodyguard?
Well, the material we reviewed consistently points towards the power of allowing and self-compassion. It sounds simple, maybe too simple,
Yeah.
but the fundamental message we need to somehow truly absorb deep down is something like, you are okay as you are right now, even with all of this messiness. Or even simpler, you are accepted as you are.
That sounds, I mean, it sounds lovely, but also, yeah, almost deceptively simple. The idea of just making space for whatever is happening inside us
Mhm.
without layering judgment on top of it.
Uh-huh.
It feels like that could be profoundly impactful.
It really is. When we can manage to accept our emotions, even the difficult ones, our thoughts, memories, desires, with a sense of, let's say, gentle awareness, the autonomic nervous system receives a fundamentally different signal: safety.
Okay.
That inner stance, that ability to say, okay, even though I feel this anxiety bubbling up, or even though I just had that really critical thought about myself, I still choose to acknowledge and accept myself in this moment. That is incredibly powerful.
So it's not about trying to force positive thinking, like I must be happy, or suppress the difficult stuff.
No, exactly. It's not about slapping on some superficial positive affirmations over deep pain. The perspectives we looked at describe it more as a deep reconditioning of the nervous system.
Reconditioning.
Yeah, essentially teaching your body, your brain, a new way to react to its own internal states. We're training our brain to respond differently to inner discomfort. Instead of automatically hitting the panic button, the fight or flight,
Right.
we learn gradually to stay present, to allow the experience to be there without needing to immediately fix it or run away from it.
And how does this shift, this internal shift towards acceptance, how does that then influence how we actually perceive the world around us? Does it change our external reality?
Well, neurologically speaking, our inner state profoundly shapes our perception of reality. It's kind of like your brain is constantly making predictions, educated guesses about what's going to happen next based on how safe or unsafe it feels inside.
Okay, that makes sense. Like a filter.
Exactly, like a filter.
Hmm.
So a nervous system that's generally sensing safety, feeling regulated, will interpret ambiguous situations, maybe even people's expressions, in a very different light than one that's constantly primed for danger, stuck in survival mode.
So you're saying if we cultivate a greater sense of inner safety through this self-acceptance, the external world might actually start to feel less threatening, less hostile.
Precisely. What we often perceive as objective reality out there can actually be, to a large extent, a projection or reflection of our nervous system's internal state.
Wow.
So by addressing and tending to our inner world, primarily through self-acceptance and compassion, our experience of the outer world can genuinely shift. We might move away from seeing threats everywhere and open up to more connection, more ease, maybe even more joy.
That's a really powerful concept.
Hey.
But the material we've been exploring also brings up this fascinating paradox, doesn't it? Why can this very idea of self-acceptance sometimes feel, well, unsettling, or even a little bit scary or suspicious?
Yes. This is such a critical piece, and it's often where people get understandably stuck, even though self-acceptance is the very thing that fosters that inner safety we're talking about.
Yeah.
Our system, our nervous system, can sometimes interpret it as suspicious, unfamiliar, maybe even dangerous.
Why would it do that? Seems counterintuitive.
Well, it often stems from these deeply ingrained, often unconscious beliefs, core beliefs like, I am only worthy of love, or I am only safe, or I only belong if I meet certain conditions.
And we see those conditions played out everywhere, don't we? Like,
Mhm.
I need to be perfect, or I always have to be strong, never show weakness, keep everyone happy.
Exactly. Don't make mistakes, suppress negative emotions, be productive. The list goes on.
Yeah.
So unconditional self-acceptance, the idea of accepting ourselves even when we fall short, when we make mistakes, when we feel inadequate, when we have thoughts or desires that feel wrong or unacceptable,
Yeah.
this directly challenges those old, deeply rooted survival strategies.
How?
And anything unfamiliar, even if it's potentially good for us, can initially trigger a sense of unease or alarm in the autonomic nervous system. It prefers the known, even if the known is uncomfortable.
So the system is basically thinking, hang on a second. If I just accept myself as I am, flaws and all, who's going to keep me on track? Who's going to make sure I stay in line? Who ensures I remain good enough to survive or be accepted?
Precisely.
It's almost like that harsh inner critic, as nasty as it feels,
Mhm.
has been unconsciously assigned the role of protector. Like if I don't beat myself up, things will fall apart.
That's a brilliant way to frame it. Ironically, the body, The nervous system can end up resisting the very thing, self-acceptance, that has the potential to heal it, precisely because it has learned to navigate the world, to survive through self-rejection and self-criticism.
Wow.
It's a deeply ingrained pattern. So the sudden absence of that criticism, or even just the idea of its absence, can feel like a loss of control and therefore paradoxically unsafe.
That makes so much sense when you put it like that. Okay, so how do we work with this paradox then? How do we gently convince our inner bodyguard that self-acceptance is actually a friend, not a foe, that it's safe to let go of the self-attack?
Well, the key, according to everything we've looked at, seems to be a gradual, gentle, and consistent approach. It's about slowly, patiently building a sense of safety while gently allowing in the unfamiliar feeling of acceptance.
So not forcing it.
Definitely not forcing it. It's not about suddenly flipping a switch from self-criticism to perfect self-love overnight. It's more about consistently, repeatedly sending those small signals of self-compassion, of allowance, of acknowledgement over time, baby steps.
Okay, so to kind of bring it all together then,
Hmm.
the central message here seems to be the true inner safety, that deep sense of okayness. It isn't really about trying to control everything around us,
Right, yeah.
but it really boils down more to the relationship we cultivate with ourselves, specifically our capacity for self-acceptance.
Precisely. It's about embracing that path of allowing, not necessarily as a way to magically avoid pain or discomfort, because life involves those things,
Sure.
but as a way to stop waging war against our own internal experience, to stop fighting ourselves.
And this isn't presented as like a quick fix, is it?
Yes.
It's described more as a way of being, maybe.
Mm.
Something we can actively develop and strengthen over time, like a muscle.
Exactly right. This attitude of self-acceptance, of self-compassion, it's a skill. It's
Mm.
something that can be learned and refined through practice. And every single time you consciously choose, even in a small way, to meet yourself with kindness instead of judgment,
Yeah.
you're sending that powerful, calming message to your inner guardian, to your nervous system. It's okay. You can relax a little. I am safe right here with myself. And as the material really underscores, that fundamentally shifts things from the inside out.
That's such an encouraging thought, isn't it? That we have that power internally. So maybe for you, the listener, just take a moment now or later today. Perhaps consider one area where you tend to be particularly hard on yourself. We all have them.
Mm-hmm.
Just notice what that feels like in your body when you go there. And then maybe just experiment gently with offering yourself just a tiny crumb of acceptance in that very moment. What might that feel like?
Yeah.
It might seem like a really small gesture, but as we've been discussing, it could actually be the very first step towards a pretty profound shift in your sense of inner safety and ultimately your overall well-being. Something to think about.